What is your favorite song? When you listen to that song, what memories, thoughts, or feelings come up for you? Individuals diagnosed with dementia may struggle with their memory or to communicate with you, but research shows that music is one of the tools we can use to provide a connection with our loved ones. That is the power of music. Welcome to Normalize the Conversation. I'm your host, Francesca Regeter, and today I'm joined by Tara Jenkins, a board-certified music therapist, certified dementia practitioner, co-author of Music, Memory, and Meaning: How to Effectively Use Music to Connect with Aging Loved Ones, and the founder of Harmony in Dementia, which provides group and individual music therapy services, music consultation services, and music workshops and training for older adults, carers, and professionals. Join us as Tara Jenkins discusses the power of music with older adults, specifically the impact music therapy can make in dementia care. Tara, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really excited for our conversation, but before we begin, I really just want to check in with you. How are you really?
I'm doing okay today. I will say I'm out in Austin, Texas. I think what we're struggling with here in the whole state, but especially this area, is the heat. We're having a heat wave, but in general, it's usually hot this time of year. But the actual temperature over the last couple days, I was looking at my thermometer on my watch, but it was like 100 with a feels like of like 120. So like the heat
Wow.
index is very high. And it really just like zaps your energy, and you don't want to be outside, but it looks beautiful. Like it's beautiful and sunny out. So it's always like a hard thing to balance, but overall, yeah, it's been a good week, a busy week. I like to be busy, so I think if I can be active and busy, that's always helpful. So,
I can't get over that heat. I was complaining because it was 91 degrees and I played tennis for 3 hours in it. And I was
yeah.
like, I'm never going outside again. I hate Florida. The heat is too much. I can't
Well,
stand it.
you guys, the humid, we have, I didn't mean to cut you off. We have our humidities here too, but Florida, I feel like your humidity in the summer like really goes crazy.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Well,
yeah, so even at 90 with it being humid, I'm sure felt so much hotter than that. Yeah.
I felt 96. So you're
Yeah.
saying feel 120? I was done at 96. I was like, I'm
Yeah,
moving. I
yeah.
can't do this anymore.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
It's hot and it does drain your
It is.
energy, right? Like it
Mm-hmm.
takes everything out of you. Like who knew vitamin D? Like, right? I was like, being in the
Exactly.
sun is so good until I'm like completely exhausted. Like, what did I do all day other than like tan?
Yeah, yeah, other than just be outside. Yeah, and I grew up on the East Coast but in New Jersey, so I'm jealous that you're by the ocean. That's the one thing I miss about being out here. So this time of year too, I'm like I want to be out, I want to be swimming and all these things. We have a lot of swimming holes and places to go in Austin, which is great because, the state is not by the water, the majority of Texas. But with the heat, sometimes it's even hard to just get motivated to do that because even though you're cool in the water, the minute you get out, you're just like, oh, this is too hot. so, so
Yes.
yeah.
No, I totally feel that. So I live with my grandma and her neighbor lives across from us. Well,
Hmm.
obviously, and we're our neighbor across from us. They always want to go to the pool every day. So
Yeah,
I'm not like a go inside the pool type person, but
got
they
it.
very much are. So to them, the
Hmm.
heat is like amazing because they can just go cool off in the pool. And to
Yeah.
me, I'm like, I don't like the pool. Like I'll sit in the hot tub, but when it's a
Hmm.
hundred degrees almost, sitting in the hot tub's
Yeah.
just not it for
You
me.
can't sit in there. Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know how. Like they love the pool so much. It makes them so happy.
Hmm.
It's really cute. They show me their exercises and I'm like, you can do more push-ups than I can, but it's fine.
Great.
But they do. They love being outside when it's hot out and just taking that dip in the pool.
Hmm.
I like kind of like you said, like it's hard to do it when it's so hot. Like I even want to be
Yeah.
outside.
Yeah, well, and as we age too, and I think to folks living with dementia, but also just older adults in general, our body with temperature changes and how we perceive temperature is different. So the heat may also feel good to them because they may be colder, than like you
Mhm.
or I. So a lot of times, our body perceives temperature different and temperature changes and things like that as we get older. So that could also be something too. They may also just be like, oh, it's warm. I don't like feel cold because I know that'll happen when I'm in communities, especially out here, because we have the AC on full blast everywhere in Texas. So sometimes people are so cold, they're bundled up, even though it's the middle of the summer. So yeah, it kind of just depends.
Yeah, no, that makes so much sense. My poor grandma, I keep it not like cold, cold. Like I really
Yeah.
try not to. But like 74 degrees, I think is like reasonable in like
Yeah.
100-degree
Yeah.
heat for the summer.
Uh-huh.
That's way too cold to her.
Mm-hmm.
So I have her like little stockings that I put over her like legs. And then I have her put on pants. And then I have her put on a blanket over herself. And she's still
Yeah.
cold. I'm like, go sit
Oh.
outside. And she'll go sit
Yeah.
outside all wrapped up. I'm it makes me sound so bad right now. Like it's really hot and I need a little bit of fresh cold
Yeah,
air.
I feel
Yeah.
like you got to find that balance. And I think that's true, like, no matter how old we are, like, some of us run hot and some of us run cold. So there's that too, right? Like, I like being bundled up. So I like the air on and I don't mind being under a bunch of blankets and stuff. But then I know other people who can't stand that. So,
No, same. I literally have my jacket like this on
yeah.
top of my arm. I love to be warm, but I
Yeah.
like the AC cold so that I can be warm. I
Hmm.
don't know why I'm like this, and my grandma's so opposite of me. So it makes
Yeah.
sense why she likes to be outside in the really hot weather. And I'm like,
Hmm.
can't do it. She's been freezing all day living with me.
Yeah. So she needs her sun break. Yeah, her warm up.
But on the note of individuals living with dementia, I'm
Yeah.
really excited to talk with you because you do music therapy and you're helping connect music to memory, which is incredible. I know. So I live with my grandma, I'm her caretaker, and she has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And her memory is just, it's not the worst, but it's not
Hmm.
great anymore. So she won't remember things from 5 minutes ago. She won't remember people's names that she's
Hmm.
known her whole life. And it's really difficult for her. And a lot of times she's trying to remember something and she just can't. It's so frustrating, or she just doesn't know why she doesn't remember and thinks
Yeah.
this is someone she's never seen before, even though she's known them for 50 years.
Hmm.
So I've started to see that music's one thing that kind of just sparks a little bit of joy in her that I don't
Hmm.
get to see very often. So I'm excited to learn more about
Yeah.
why that is.
Sure. I'm happy to dive into it. I can talk about this forever, but a little bit about music therapy, just so you kind of know like how that works and how your listeners, because music therapy, we don't just work with older adults, but the idea is we're a clinical and evidence-based practice. So we use music to accomplish individualized goals and objectives. And that can be done a lot of different ways. So we work with folks to support social, emotional, cognitive, physical, communication, musical, and spiritual needs. So sometimes we're working on all of those. Sometimes we're working on one or two. It really just depends on who is in front of us, who we're treating. And we do that with an assessment. So when you think of PT, OT, speech, very similar. So we assess the strengths and the needs of that person, and then we provide treatment. And a lot of times treatment includes creating, so creating music together, singing, moving, listening to music, playing music. So again, depending on who's in front of us, I work with groups and individuals, all older adults. So, in my groups, lots of instruments. We're doing a lot of movement. I've got drums. I sing and play guitar. A lot of things going on. With individuals, with older adults, that it really depends. I provide in-person services and then I do virtual services. So like as we're talking on Zoom today, I provide music therapy that way. And for an individual, what's really great is I can tailor or customize even further. So I can find out, okay, you grew up in Florida at this time period. This is the music that was popular, or this is what was going on. And then I can also think about, okay, you love country music. So in a group setting, I'm going to do a lot of different styles of music because I've got lots of folks in front of me. But if I have an individual who loves country, that's kind of where we're going to live. I'm going to share other types of music, but we're really going to dive in deep because that's what they really like. So that's kind of when it comes to individuals. But all of this is to say we use aspects of music to achieve individualized goals both in and outside of session. And we work with all ages and stages of life. So I always say anywhere a nurse can work, we can work. So, if you're in the hospital, it's a great thing to ask. And in Florida, there's a great, at FS, I think it's FSU, There's a great hospital music therapy program, like phenomenal,
Mhm.
like very like known for. But it's a great thing to ask because you can say, hey, do you have a music therapist? And music therapists are really great in the hospital setting because a lot of times we might be there for a short stay. So you might just see a music therapist for one visit, but maybe they're helping you with pain. Maybe they're helping you redirect so you're not focused on the pain. They might be helping you cope. Maybe you just got a diagnosis and it's something that you're working through. Maybe if there have been music therapists in chemo, so helping folks who have to sit all day in chemo treatment, music therapists still come in that way. So a music therapist in a hospital can look a lot of different ways depending on what unit they're working on and things like that. We work with kids, we work with older adults. So yeah, pretty much everyone. But mental health as well. But when it comes to going back to older adults and those emotional connections, music activates so many areas of our brain, and it's includes those areas associated with memory and emotion. So that's one of the reasons music is activating those areas in our brain. So we can all listen to the same song and have different reactions and emotions based on our past experiences. So our neurons, they continue to fire till that connection's made. And that's one of the many reasons music is so powerful with folks living with dementia. Because even though they've got areas of their brain that are damaged, music is throughout where it's not just in one center. So like when you think speech or movement kind of being in one specific area. Music, when you look at imaging from someone listening to music, or if they're singing, or if they think about playing piano, if they don't have a piano, in the imaging, but they've done different things like that, and different areas of our brain light up depending how we're being active in music participation. So that's one of the reasons why you can still make connections with music when you might not be able to make connections. So sometimes I'll be in a group and someone will say, this individual had a stroke and maybe they can no longer talk, but they can sing. And so it's because a different area of the brain is being activated. So that's sometimes the science behind it.
That is, wow.
Yeah.
I guess when I thought of the brain, I thought like every piece is separate. I never thought how music could kind of overlap everywhere.
Yeah. And another way to think about it too is music is multisensory. So, as a music therapist, if I bring in a music instrument, I'm trying to see if I have any, but even just think a guitar, because that's behind me, so you at least see it. But with a guitar, if I had somebody strum my guitar, they're getting the tactile experience. So they're getting the vibrations of the guitar. Visually, they're getting input. They're getting the auditory input of the sound of the guitar. Now, taste and smell we don't always include those, but sometimes I do include essential oils or, if we're talking about the beach and like the smell of suntan lotion. I smell Hawaiian tropic and that brings me to a place. So you can incorporate smells and tastes, as music therapists. That kind of just depends on who we're working with, but it's not to say don't incorporate those. If you're listening to, I'm thinking summertime and beach, if you're listening to the Beach Boys and you want to have watermelon while you're listening, like there's nothing wrong with that, right? Make it a whole experience. And so going back to these emotional connections, if you're to think of your favorite song or something that your parents or your guardian sang to you or the first concert you ever attended, that's going to connect us emotionally to a time and place. So then if we hear that melody or that song later in life, it can transport us or bring us back there. And so that's a lot of times how music can be so powerful for older adults living with dementia, because as they're starting to lose connections with their memories, with their identity, with the people that are close to them, sometimes they can hear a song, and for that moment, it can bring them back to, oh, this is the song I danced to at my wedding, or this is the song that, I sang, since it's your grandma, maybe she sang a lullaby to you growing up. So maybe that's a way that you connect with that type of a song. Or maybe your grandmother's mother sang something to her, or her father, or whoever, someone close to her. And that's what I really love about music is we're all going to have these different connections, and older adults have those strong emotional responses even when they're no longer verbally communicating or responding to typical methods of care. So a lot of times as a music therapist, I will share, sometimes I get referrals and folks are like, I've tried everything. We're really trying to engage mom or dad or my aunt, or it's a professional caregiver. I'm trying to engage my client and we've really tried everything. Do you think music will help? And I always say, yeah, let's give it a try. For the most part, it will. But of course, you do have some folks where it's just not their thing, and that's fine too. But I always say, give it a try, test it out, see what works. And typically, music, because it's non-pharmacological, because it's multisensory, there's a lot of ways that we can connect with that individual. That's a lot of times why you get a stronger response from music. And what's really great about that is we're providing older adults with dementia a way to access experiences and express a range of emotions. And that can all lead to a positive quality of life. And, we were talking earlier, when an individual is diagnosed with dementia, depending on where they are in their journey, they lose a lot of their independence. They get told they can't drive anymore, or that maybe someone needs to be there to help them, or, if they're in a care community, sometimes what they even wear, what time they get up, some places are really good about individualizing that, but not everybody is, right? So all of these choices are being taken away. So music can be a way you can bring choice back. Do you want to listen to Elvis or the Beatles? Do you want to play a maraca or a drum? So in music therapy, I always try to provide a lot of choices because I'm very aware of how many choices my clients no longer have. And no is a choice. I always like to remind people about that because I never want someone to force music on somebody. So if somebody who loves Elvis all the time, they're listening to Elvis and then all of a sudden they don't want to hear it, I always tell caregivers, don't force it. Revisit, reapproach, redirect, try again another day, another week, because you don't want to turn it into a negative association. It was a positive experience, so you don't want to force it. And maybe that individual, again, in that moment in their journey in dementia, maybe it's bringing up something, or maybe they just simply don't want to listen to music. We have times where there are things we don't want to do. It's the same, it's the same no matter how old we are. So I always like to say that as well is, you want to make it a positive experience for that individual. And again, give them the choice. If they say no, then kind of respect that choice. And I know, with some things with care, they may not want to do it, but it may be something they have to do. And so then you have to kind of adapt. But since music, especially for caregiving, can be used to make meaningful connections and as a recreational piece and a way to engage, you want to keep it positive as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean, that makes so much sense. First of all, it's so true. There's so many things being taken away, so many choices.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know for my grandma, it's the hardest part is losing that independence because
Yeah.
a few years ago, maybe not a few years ago, like 6 or 7 years ago, she was still traveling around the world as a tennis official. She was going
Mm-hmm.
to different states and countries by herself. She was doing all these things. And now it's like, I need to depend on my granddaughter to drive me, or I have
Yeah.
to figure out how to use Uber or Lyft.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, she looks for the phone number on Facebook, so it's going great for her.
Yeah, yeah, it's a lot. And technology too can be a great help and it can be overwhelming. It kind of depends where that individual was using technology before, they kind of start it as they progress in their journey with dementia. So yeah, I think technology sometimes is positive, but sometimes can be overwhelming. I always say that when I talk about virtual services. Sometimes virtual services aren't appropriate for an individual, and that can be for a variety of reasons. But that's something during the assessment that, I'll go into. But yeah, being able to find that number, and then that's frustrating. And then you miss your appointment or you miss whatever because you can't figure out the way to get the person to you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very overwhelming and not having those
Yeah.
choices, not having as much ease to do things. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
before a few years ago, iPhones had a button. Then suddenly they don't have a button anymore, and she uses the
Yeah.
phone, and it's like
Uh-huh.
I didn't remember how to use the phone when it had a button. Now suddenly with
Yeah.
no button, how do I open and close the phone? It's
Mm-hmm.
very overwhelming. There's constantly things changing in kind of her environment, and yet
Yeah.
so many choices being taken away. Down to, I know that I'm learning how to do it better. But one thing I do is I don't really give her a lot of choices in food per se. I meal prep
Mm-hmm.
for her, and there's
Yeah.
2 options for lunch each week and 2 options for dinner each week, solely
Mm-hmm.
because I know this is what she likes. And it's
Mm-hmm.
cost affordable to do it that way instead of having 10 different recipes
Yeah.
that I need to go buy ingredients for. But that's a choice I'm taking away from her when she wants more than just chicken and rice or pasta for
Yeah.
Jewel. So it's
Yeah.
constantly taking these choices away and not giving her a space to express herself in the way she wants to all the time. And that's what I've realized with music, actually through the neighbor, because the two of them, we'd be out to a restaurant and then live music would come on and they'd get like
Hmm.
excited and they'd start like dancing, and they were no longer like upset about the idea that I was telling them what they were going to eat. Why
Hmm.
did I do that? If you have have you been to Cheesecake Factory? Have you seen that there's a million
Yes,
things with the
it's
menus?
overwhelming. Those
Yes.
menus, there's too many choices. I think even if you are healthy and well
Yeah,
individual, it is a lot of choices.
it
And
is.
yeah, and going back to your two choices, that's something that's recommended in dementia care is giving an either or, like a yes or no or a this or that. So you are, doing the right thing there, but I understand, yeah, it does feel like you're taking things away, but please continue with Cheesecake Factory because that is overwhelming, that menu.
So I learned they used to love to go to Cheesecake Factory, but that
Yeah.
menu became very overwhelming for them.
Hmm.
So anytime we go out now, I've gotten to the point where, specifically for my grandma, not as much for the neighbor, but for my grandma specifically, I give her one or two options. I'm like, you like shrimp. You always want shrimp. These are
Yeah.
two shrimp dishes, or this is a shrimp dish. This is what you're getting. Instead of having her look through the menu because I know she starts to panic, it
Hmm.
becomes a lot. But it's another choice being taken away. But when there's
Yeah.
music happening at the restaurant, we go somewhere with live music, they're
Hmm.
so excited about the music and wanting to dance. Sometimes they'll be sitting down and they'll like moving their body,
Yeah.
or they'll want to stand up and dance. And it's something that brings joy, where no one's taking
Hmm.
away a choice from them. No one's telling them this is what you have to have, this is what you have to
Yeah.
do. It's about just moving their bodies or
Yeah.
sitting and feeling good. And I saw how powerful that was constantly. The only
Hmm.
time I could really get them both smiling at the same time
Yeah.
was either teasing me or music.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's amazing. And that's something I never would have thought of, which blows
Hmm.
my mind because anytime I'm upset or I'm happy or whatever emotion I'm feeling, I have a Taylor Swift song set for it. Like I
There
am
you
ready
go.
with
Yeah,
my music.
you're living it. Yeah. But a
Yeah.
lot of times we don't think about that applying it to other areas of life, right? And even me as a music therapist, sometimes I don't use music first for myself, right? I can recommend all these things for other people and I'm like, "Oh, use that for you. Like you you need that in the moment." I love that you have a Taylor Swift song for each emotion or feeling or whatever's going on. That's great.
It's like the most helpful thing for me. I don't know why. It's like
Yeah.
when I'm like super excited, like something good has happened with like
Hmm.
work or getting a speaking engagement or something I'm excited about, long live, right? It's like that moment
Yeah.
of like things are finally working out, or I'm like,
Hmm.
someone hurt me and made me cry all too well. Like there's just a
Yes.
song and it just speaks to me. I understand it. I feel connected. I feel heard, and I can
Hmm.
scream it out, dance it out, walk it out, whatever. And it's so great. And I started to see that, oh, there's ways to do that with my grandma.
Hmm.
And maybe we like different music, unfortunately.
Yeah, and
But
that's okay.
is it sometimes
Yeah.
when she's in charge of the music? Is it
Uh-huh.
okay? Depends.
Yeah.
No. So I sat there one night with her and our neighbor Corinne, and we put on the TV, and I put YouTube on the TV, and I was like, okay, name an artist you guys like. And we
Hmm.
spent like 3 hours just letting them each take turns picking an
That's
artist they
great.
liked and picking a song and dancing it out and drinking wine.
Yeah.
And the amount of joy it brought them, versus earlier that day, I had one of them crying on one side of me that they wish they were no longer here, and the other one begging
Yeah.
me to take them to get put down. I was like, so we
Yeah.
went from that a few hours before to
Hmm.
singing and dancing and laughing, or even we played a Kenny Rogers song that reminded our neighbor about her husband, and she started crying, but it was a happy cry, tears of joy. It was like
Hmm.
positive memory and love,
Yeah.
and it was just so different. The power of music is, I never would have like been able to describe or imagine it until I saw it with them.
Yeah, and everything you're sharing is things that I see in my work all the time, and also when I'm working, I do a lot of education and training for professionals and caregivers, and we see, we talk about a lot of those moments, and music as redirection. So talking about when someone is feeling down, you want them to process those feelings, but then can you redirect to an activity that's positive, and that's exactly what you did in that moment. And giving them those choices is really wonderful. And I know we talked about, how might you build a playlist, and you've kind of started. I will say, the way that you went about it is really great. When you're creating a playlist for yourself, I mean, this doesn't just have to be for folks living with dementia, although that's kind of like how I'm going to focus it. You're really a detective. So you're trying to gather as much information as possible because you want it to be a strong playlist for someone you're caring for. So they'll interact in the ways that you've mentioned, being able to think of their husband, or being able to dance it out, or just like being happy. And again, you can have happy and sad tears, right? Emotions. The other thing I always love to share with folks is we can hear one song and have multiple emotions all at the same time, and think about in your own personal life, you hear a song, maybe that brings you back to a place of joy, but then maybe you've heard it another time during, a struggle. So maybe all of these emotions are coming up at the same time. And that's the same for folks living with dementia. What I will say is they can't always express why they're having those feelings or emotions. So I always like to make people aware as you're trying out music, just be a detective, but also be very observant, and if there are certain songs that are making your loved one or the person you're caring for, if they're becoming increasingly agitated or upset. So we can have adverse reactions to music. We can hear a song and not want to hear it. We can hear a song and be uncomfortable about it. So if that's the case, you just want to really be aware of that. And again, not force it. You can always skip to another song. If they're able to process and talk about what they're feeling, I recommend that. If you're not comfortable doing that, that's when I say reach out to your support system, whether it's a doctor, a social worker, a music therapist, and then you can kind of figure out, is it volume? Is the music just too loud? Sometimes that's it. Maybe it's not the music, but it's too like sensory overload, or maybe it is the specific song. And so, so there's a lot to really think through. But when you're thinking about this playlist, research suggests music from our late teens, early 20s. I've heard it recently called the reminiscence bump. I think that's what someone told me the other day, but it's basically music from 18 to 25. And it's the music that's going to have the strongest connection with us as we get older, and it stays with us over time. And so I also like to include music from early childhood because, as I mentioned earlier, it could be music that was playing when you were growing up, music that your guardians or parents listened to or grew up with. So I like to include those songs as well. And then any songs that you have a strong connection with. So if you're the primary caregiver and you have that personal relationship, maybe there were certain songs, thinking about you and your grandma, maybe there were certain songs that connected the two of you over time. So you want to include those too. For me, anytime I hear any song from White Christmas or see the movie, I connect to my grandmother. So immediately, I think of her. But the three big questions you want to ask for a playlist, and you were kind of doing this with the YouTube, showing YouTube to them, which I love, is what kind of music do you enjoy? So I always say start with an open-ended question. But if your loved one's struggling, that's where you go to yes or no. That's where you narrow it down. So maybe you say country or Broadway, or classical or rock and roll. So, you give them two styles of music. So then once they are able to choose that, do you have any specific bands or artists you enjoy? Again, start open-ended, but if they're having difficulty, but in the first question, they chose Broadway and rock and roll, now give two choices from each of those. So for Broadway, you could do The Sound of Music or Hello Dolly. For rock and roll, maybe it's Beatles and Elvis, so again, there are lots of possibilities there, but just some examples. And the goal is with each question, you get more specific. So then that'll help you get specific songs eventually for a playlist. And then last is the third question, what are your favorite songs? And that's kind of what you were doing. That's where you were starting, which is also a good place to start if someone can come to mind immediately. For some of us, it's right on the tip of our tongue. We can immediately say what song it is. For me, one song, no matter what kind of a mood I'm in, Fool in the Rain by Led Zeppelin. I play it loud. I sing it loud. I love it. So, you've got those songs. You were, mentioning the Taylor Swift songs earlier. But for others and folks living with dementia, sometimes that kind of an open-ended question can be overwhelming, or they can't think of anything, you want to allow them time. You want to give them extra time to answer, and pace, a little bit slower when you're asking questions and waiting for responses. But if they're unable to answer that open ended, go back to question 1 and 2. So they've said Broadway and rock and roll, and now they've answered Sound of Music and the Beatles. So now go to the Sound of Music and say, okay, do you like Edelweiss or My Favorite Thing? For the Beatles, do you want to hear I Want to Hold Your Hand or Let It Be? So then you're getting more specific with each question, which gives you more information. And the other thing I like to say too is sometimes folks can react differently to verbal questions than when music is playing. So back to your example of YouTube, sometimes it's just a great opportunity to put on the Beatles and just see how they react. So if you do the math, okay, my grandma was born this year. So at 18 years old, that would be this decade. And then maybe start there. So you could start with a whole decade. Now what's great with Google and Spotify and YouTube and everything, you can search top hits of 1961, top hits of 1945. So that sometimes is a great place to start if you're unsure, or if your loved one or the person you're caring for with dementia, if they can't communicate to you, that's a good way to get started. But putting music on and just observing their reactions is also going to guide your choices. So there's a lot that you can do there. Singing, dancing, smiling, all good things. Arms crossed, hands over ears. That's a big, those are big cues, right? Saying no. If they walk away, so maybe they don't say anything, but they walk out of the room. That's also maybe a visual cue that's letting you know. Sometimes with folks living with dementia, when we talk about someone being anxious or agitated, or all of a sudden they act a certain way and we feel like it's out of nowhere, that could be the only way that they're able to communicate what they're feeling in that moment. So so someone walking away, they may not be able to say, I don't like this music, or I don't want to do this right now, but they can remove themselves, right? So a lot of times, in general, we're a detective when we're caring for someone living with dementia, but with music as well. So you just want to be observant of that. And then, if they can't answer questions, you can go to their family, their friends, music that they enjoyed, if your grandma and and her neighbor, if they did live music or dancing or anything, if they did stuff together at some point in time. I don't know how long they've been neighbors, but that's an area that you could ask. And I always just say, just don't take it personally if they don't like the choices you're providing, or they liked a song one day and they don't the next. That's just where they are in the moment. And it's better to skip the song, like I mentioned, try something else, maybe even just go outside for a few minutes and then come back to music. Sometimes it's a couple minutes, sometimes it's a day or a different time of day. And that's something to think about too. For a lot of folks living with dementia, the kind of the end of the day, that term sundowning, can become an anxious time. And for a lot of folks, it's because they have that urgency that in their younger life, they were cooking at that time, or they were picking kids up from school, or they were getting home from work, or, there were things that you have to do, right? Certain times of day are certain, are cues for you. In the morning, here are the things I do. In the evening, this is what I would do. And so even though those activities are no longer present, that urgency is still there. So sometimes music can help as redirection in those moments. So, if someone says, they need to go pick their kids up from school, there's this fine line of, you don't want to lie to an individual with dementia. There's a lot of thoughts on this. So there's a lot of ways of thoughts of like therapeutic fibbing. For me, I like to be as truthful as possible, because I think individuals with dementia, even though they may not verbally communicate as well, they can pick up on our body language, our emotions. They know when we're being authentic. And so for me, I try to be as authentic as possible. So if somebody wants to pick up their children, I might start asking them about their children. So again, that redirection. Oh, well, where are they right now? Or, what are they doing? Are they, and they might answer they're in school. And if they say they're in school, then I'm going to join their reality. Sometimes we force our reality, and an individual with dementia no longer has that capability to be present in that moment, right? So yeah, this is just a very quick way to explain this. There's a lot of like trains of thought about this and people agree one way or the other. But for me, I've been doing this about 16 years. I want to be authentic as I can be. And so a lot of times music is a great way to redirect, where you might say, well, it's not quite time for that, but I had some music that I just wanted. Can you just give me a listen and tell me what you think? Approaching it that way too, when you're redirecting. Sometimes music can be helpful in that way. Music can be helpful with ADLs. So thinking of care. So activities of daily living, bathing can be a really difficult experience for folks living with dementia. And I'm seeing you nod. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I think it's a from research and from things I've read in my experience, I think it's a sensory issue of, just the way the water feels, and our skin is different. Everything is different. Temperatures, as we were going back to. Also, when you think about taking a shower, usually that's like a personal, individual activity, right? Like usually your granddaughter's not there, or usually, in a care community you perceive them as a stranger. And now all of a sudden this stranger is here while you've like undressed, and why are they here? So there's a lot of different reasons why bathing can be challenging, but a way that you can use music is, again, setting up your environment. So setting up the bathroom, making sure the temperature is as comfortable as possible, the water temperature, get everything running, have everything you need in the bathroom. But you could play music on the way to the bathroom, right? You could sing a song together on the way to the bathroom. You could have music playing in the bathroom and say, oh, do you want to come with me? I hear this music. Or, just start singing and dancing to the music. And so sometimes that can relieve a little bit of that anxiety. And again, going back to redirection, if music is on while bathing is happening, sometimes that individual might just start singing, and that's what they're focused on now. They're focused on singing along versus on what care might be happening. So
that is genius.
yeah.
I love that, because it is a lot about kind of just shifting their perspective a little bit on what's happening.
Yeah.
And I really want to go back to what you said about sundowning, because I did not realize why that happened. And I was recently been noticing that around like the 6:30 time period in the day, we could be out to eat and she'll go from talking to like shutting down, or she'll have to get up and start cleaning stuff right away. Like she can't really, from about 6:30 to 7, she just cannot just sit and have a normal conversation at the dinner table. And I was like, this is so weird. Like, why is this happening? I'm like tracking the time. I'm like, is this a daily thing? Like, is something happening before? At that time, it's when my grandfather would get home and she'd be setting the table and preparing dinner to sit down with him every night. So that was her reality for 50 something years. And suddenly it's not anymore. So maybe like putting on music at that time would be a really great idea.
That could be helpful, or just changing the time you eat too. So maybe, and again, it's trial and error, and that's using music, and that's dementia in general. But maybe changing, okay, if she feels like she needs to get dinner ready, maybe get dinner ready at that time. That might be a way. And then if she does start asking about your grandfather, or asking where he is, that's something too that I like to talk to folks about. And again, a lot of research, a lot of different opinions on this. But for me, if an individual doesn't necessarily remember, if they don't remember that their husband has died, if you tell them their husband has died, they're reliving that traumatic experience all over again. So they're feeling that pain for the first time, even though you know that they've already lived it, you've lived it with them. So I don't feel that that's helpful for that individual. Again, redirecting to, tell me about grandpa, or like, what did you love when he came home from work? Did he say something? Did he bring flowers? What was his favorite meal? And I know, depending on your situation, you may know those answers already, but even asking those questions for her, that's going to shift her focus a little bit from where is he to talking about him, and making her feel like he's there, because you're talking about him and you're honoring him and celebrating him, even though he's physically no longer there. And there are times too where an individual who might not know that that person has passed away, you might be having that conversation and all of a sudden they'll say, oh yeah, he passed of this, or he's no longer with us, or whatever. They may have that moment of clarity. That can happen too. But yeah, I think there's a lot of things. Yeah, I think putting music on at that time is also a good thing to try. See if that helps. Changing dinner, as long as it doesn't, if you have a routine and it works, keep it. But if there are things you can tweak, maybe if she wants to be busy at that time, you can keep her busy in a productive way. You know, can she help you do some sort of the meal prep, you know, even like fold napkins, or maybe, you know, you're in the kitchen doing the meal prep and maybe she can help with maybe laundry, maybe towels or something need to be folded. And in a community setting, sometimes those things are there for folks even if they've already been done, right? So it's like, well, here's just a stack of towels. So like maybe your towels were folded, maybe you unfold them and ask her to fold them, you know? So again, it's keeping her busy. But it's also providing purpose, because I think that too with dementia, a lot of times that purposefulness, that, you know, how am I being of use, of service, you know, how am I providing purpose? And a lot of times folks with dementia want that but don't know how to do that. So different things around the house, or even music providing a purpose, you know, because you could do a playlist as an activity. So maybe that, you know, as you were doing with YouTube, you know, and then it was like 3 hours went by. But, you know, turning that into an activity, or, you know, what are different volunteer opportunities? Maybe, you know, I know folks who have knitted all their life, and that's something that they're still able to do. So can you knit and donate that knitting somewhere? So again, just like trying to find those opportunities to make them more purposeful.
That's so funny you said about the knitting. So my grandma's
Yeah.
neighbor, her name's Corinne. She's like the cutest thing. She gets mad because I tell people she's 90 and she's only 88. But she's the cutest thing. So an 88-year-old. And she knits hats for her son-in-law is a gynecologist, and when the baby's born, he gives them one of the hats.
That's
she knitted.
great. Yeah.
It's the cutest thing in the world. She knits a hat a day. Obsessed.
Yeah.
She tries to teach me to knit all
awesome.
the time. Can't do it for the life of me. Don't know why.
Yeah.
But it's so great. It gives her something to look forward to every day and a piece of purpose.
Yeah.
My grandma, I put coloring pages in front of her. One thing my nonprofit does is we donate like handmade cards to patients and psych wards. So I give her coloring pages to sit in color. Helps me, gives her something to do. Love it.
Yeah.
But now you also just gave me an excuse to never fold my own laundry again.
Yeah, if she likes doing it, right? I don't want you I don't want to start recommending, hey, have this person that you're caring for do all these things they don't like to do. But for someone who took care of a house for so many years, right? That's kind of like how you have to start thinking about it is, okay, this is what her routine looked like when she, you know, she cared for her house or cared for her home. If she had a job, what was that job, you know? And that's how you can tap back into that purposefulness and connecting back to identity. That's where music can really be helpful, because sometimes, you know, you can hear a song, it's going to bring you back to that place, it's going to connect to a memory, and then you as the detective are like, okay, now I have that information, so now like how can I use that?
That makes a lot of sense. So like,
yeah,
don't put on It's a Hard Knock Life and throw all the laundry.
Throw out laundry. Yeah, probably not the best song to pair it to, unless she has a good sense of humor and finds that funny. Then go, by all means, go for it. You know. But again, I say to caregivers too. It's you know the folks you're caring for the best. That's whether you're a professional caregiver, family, other unpaid. You know, however you identify as a caregiver, you know that individual the best. And so that's what I always say is like, trust your gut, do what you think is right. And you can always adapt and adjust. I think what becomes really difficult is you get a lot of feedback, get a lot of opinions or suggestions from folks who mean well. But if you're the primary caregiver, you know, you're in there day in and day out. And so you're doing what you can. So I always want to try to give caregivers tips and tools and resources to make their life easier, but also to make that to keep that relationship, right? Because that's really important. A lot of times when you shift into this role of caregiver, now your relationship with that individual, especially if it's a family member or a close friend, or, you know, now that those dynamics change. And so music can be a really great way to connect meaningfully, especially if, you know, you're providing care for someone. So, you know, the example I use a lot is in a long-term care community. There's a nurse who always comes by to give a certain type of medicine that an individual does not want. They see that nurse. They may not know exactly what they're doing, but they know they don't want it. They see that person and that's what they identify them with. So a lot of times I'll say, hey, if you have 5 minutes, can you come into our music therapy group? Because then now that individual with dementia, you're singing with them. You're playing an instrument with them. You're sitting next to them and you're engaging in a different activity that's positive. Now they're going to associate you in a positive way, you know, or maybe when you come give the medicine and you know they love Hound Dog, maybe sing, I'm giving a lot of Elvis examples today, but maybe sing Hound Dog on your way over, so there's a lot of different ways that you can use music to make it more meaningful, and then also a more positive experience for both people, because at the you want it to be positive for both folks if you can.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard when those lines start to blur between
Yeah.
like being a granddaughter and being a caregiver, because
Mm-hmm.
like no one wants to be the person that like someone hates because they're making them take their blood pressure medicine. Like no one wants to like
Exactly.
be that
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
But unfortunately it happens. So finding ways, I love that, to kind of twist it so I still can have like the positives and the fun. I can still be
Mm-hmm.
the fun granddaughter, but
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
be the responsible granddaughter at the same time.
Yeah. And you're still going to have those right? There's challenges are still going to be there, but the hope is if you have more of a balance, you know what I mean? Then it, you can draw to those experiences, or, maybe trying to think of a specific example, but a lot of times, again, our reality versus their reality. I always say join them on their journey, join them in the moment wherever that is, because a lot of times, we have a timetable. We're like, okay, we need to eat at this time, or this is when this needs to be done. And some things don't have to be done at that time. So be open to that. Can you be flexible? Now, medications and, there are certain things that have to be taken at a certain time of day, things like that. So there are some things where you do have to push. But then if you can think in your routine, okay, I don't have to push in this moment. So how can I make that positive? Or maybe we can do that later, or maybe I'll come back to it an hour from now and see if they're more receptive. So, a lot of times that refocus, redirection, maybe go do music, maybe go outside for a walk, go to the pool, then maybe come back to that activity that maybe they didn't want to do before that. Yeah.
That makes so much sense. It's a lot about just meeting them where they are and being
Yeah.
collaborative. Like we said it back in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning, right? It's a lot of losing independence, a lot of losing
Yeah.
freedom to make choices. So giving them a chance to feel heard. I know
Mm-hmm.
that's something I'm working on a lot with my grandma, is learning how to be flexible and realizing sometimes I'll have like podcast recordings or meetings that I do end
Yeah.
up pushing and moving because
Mm-hmm.
at that time maybe she doesn't want to sit down and watch a movie for an hour.
Yeah.
And like sometimes I have to say, all right, I love what I do, but is this
Mm-hmm.
podcast recording more important than her safety in this moment?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
learning to give her that choice of, no, I actually don't want to be locked in my room for an hour watching a movie. I want to go to the pool. I want you to come with me to the
Mm-hmm.
pool. Then learning to make those adjustments. And it's not easy. It's definitely not
No,
easy
not.
when you require like the income to actually like work.
Yeah.
So I'm in a very
Uh-huh.
lucky position.
Yes.
But being willing to collaborate in whatever ways you can.
And I always say to reach out to your community. There are a lot of resources out there, but sometimes it's overwhelming. As a caregiver, you're given this diagnosis. Now your loved one has this diagnosis, and now it's, you're being told, okay, here are all the things they need, or here's how I have to support them. There are a lot of resources in the community, but sometimes it is difficult to get connected. And so, like, finding your tribe, I think, is very important. And I will say there's a lot coming out now about young caregivers, about folks who are, you're a little younger than me, but, people who are in their 20s who are caring for a parent, a grandparent, a sibling, things like that. Hilarity for Charity, I know, are starting. They're one charity that do a lot of free virtual events, and I know they're focusing on younger caregivers. I think it's Lorenzo's house, but they're another one that focus on young caregivers. Sometimes too, people with a spouse who maybe has been diagnosed with early onset. So maybe they're both in their 40s, but now you're no longer a wife or a husband. You're now the primary caregiver for that person. So, even just doing a Google search, sometimes that's a good place to start. AARP is another one. I think if you search caregiving resources or caregivers, they have a whole list of things that goes through financial, what you should be thinking about financially, how to get things in order, how to get things medically in order, how to prepare for the hospice conversation, different things like that, things that a lot of times as a caregiver you come to in crisis. And that's the hardest time. because you can't absorb that info. Kind of fight or flight mode. You're in this crisis mode. So I always try to share resources with caregivers and just say, this might feel like a lot of information, but you have it. So then you can decide, okay, I'm going to take a half an hour today. I have time today. I'm going to take a half an hour and I'm going to read this article. Or maybe, I'm going to go on Hilarity for Charity's website and I'm going to see, do they have any virtual events for caregivers? Maybe I can just attend one of them. Or in your area, maybe it's an in-person event. The different aging societies and different organizations like that, areas of aging, and a lot of times different cities and communities will have a website for aging services. So that's a place to start. And then I always say to folks, as far as music therapy is concerned, you can reach out to me. Even if it's not me who helps you. I'm happy to connect folks with music therapists in their area. I'm connected virtually with a lot of folks. So I'm always happy to say, if somebody needs a music therapist or wants a music therapist in their area, if you're not going to work with me virtually, or if you don't live here in the Austin area, I'm happy to try to connect you to the best of my ability. But I think that too, is kind of a theme through this conversation, is support for caregivers, and music can be a great support, but trying to tap into these other areas too that can be supportive.
You are absolutely incredible. How can people contact you?
Well, thank you so much. So you can contact me at my website, just www.harmonyindementia.com. There's a contact form there. So that's the easiest way to get a hold of me. Email contact@harmonyindementia.com. And then I'm on social media at harmonyindementia. So there's lots of ways to reach out to me. My YouTube page, it's very slowly, I'm building it. But it is a goal of mine to provide a lot of resources for caregivers. So I'm trying to do different videos that are on my social media. I'm trying to upload them to YouTube as well. But yeah, if you have any questions, I provide individual and group services. I also do consultation work. So maybe as a caregiver, maybe you just need a 30-minute call. Maybe you want to use music and you're comfortable using music, but you just don't really know how, or, your loved one's struggling with a certain type of care, or maybe they're struggling a certain time of day. That's something that I can assess through consultation. And then I do a lot of education and support. So I work with organizations and do webinars and different things like that to educate folks. So yeah, there's a lot of ways that you can get a hold of me. And then one thing I didn't mention, I know we've talked, like I said, I could talk forever. So I hope I'm not taking up too much of your time. But I co-wrote a book called Music, Memory, and Meaning. And you can find it on Amazon, and I'll send you the link so we can put it in the show notes and everything. But essentially, it was made for caregivers. It was me and 2 other music therapists. And the idea of the book was you can use this book and a device to play music. So YouTube, Google, so your phone, computer, whatever. And it breaks it down into why music is powerful. So it goes into more of what I was talking about at the beginning of our conversation. It goes into tips for music listening, things to set up your environment. The second part is playlists. So we do from early 1900s through the 1970s, country, Broadway, lots of different genres and decades. And there's about 15 to 20 songs listed under each one. And those, from our experience, the 3 of us, at that point, we had 10 years each of experience. It was the songs that were most popular with folks we worked with. So if you don't know where to start, that could be a good starting point. Okay, they love 1950s music. So here's more than just rock and roll in the 50s. And then the third part is engaged listening discussions. So there'll be music notes next to some of the songs on the playlists. And then they will be in the third part. So it'll be a song, Let It Be, we'll say by the Beatles, and it'll give you when it was published, maybe a fact or 2 about the song, what you could do while you're listening to the song, and then it'll give you some discussion prompts. So things you can ask about the song. So it's a way, again, our goal was to make things easier for caregivers and a way that they could meaningfully engage in music with their loved one or with the person they're caring for. So we've talked about some of that. The book goes more in depth into a lot of what we talked about today.
I love that. That is the resource I know I need, because
yeah,
again, I can sit on YouTube and tell what are your favorite artists, and then picking random songs from there. But creating a discussion out of it, that's a great way to connect to find what it means to them. Why do these songs make them so happy? What
Yeah.
is it about? How can we maybe process an emotion they're feeling? Maybe it was like a moment in time that just brought them so much joy that they haven't talked about or
Hmm.
thought about in a long time. It
Yeah.
really does create a great way, I think, just as a caregiver, because sometimes I don't know what to talk about anymore because we have the same conversations over and over again. Yesterday,
Hmm.
we sat at the table, the three of us, for an hour and had the same conversation 4 times.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like
Yeah.
learning, it's so cute, love it. But it's like learning new ways to have meaningful
Hmm.
conversations that are also new and fun for me. So I'm
Yeah.
more engaged, they're more engaged, and we're all
Yeah.
getting something out of it together.
Hmm.
So I'm gonna buy your book. I
Oh,
can't
well, thank
wait.
you. But yeah, yeah, I'm here to help. So that's kind of what I say. My goal is to provide access and education and awareness, on the benefits of music for older adults and especially folks living with dementia. But I also have a passion for the caregiver side of things. I also really want to support caregivers along the way, too.
Thank you so much for listening to Normalize the Conversation. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. This podcast is an initiative of Inspiring My Generation, focusing on normalizing the conversation, bringing education and awareness to the forefront, and amplifying global voices to spark change and hope. Inspiring My Generation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization on a mission towards suicide prevention through awareness, conversation, education, and support. Connect with us on Instagram at Inspiring My Generation and visit our website inspiringmygeneration.org to learn more about our work and how you can make a difference.